What we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and take our latex. Okay. Go ahead and take your brush. And what you're going to do, if you have your indentions, if you hold your mold or place your mold in one direction, if you flip it around, you're going to see the divots and the deepness of your indentions in a different angle. So as you are applying this first layer or the rest of your layers, kind of rotate it to see and look for your holes. What we're going to do so that we make sure that we get all through our indentions all the way to the bottom of our holes or our impressions, we're going to paint a thin layer of latex first. Okay, so you're working with a brush, so you're going to have more brush strokes. If you jam and move it around too much, you create bubbles. You don't want bubbles. Grab a little bit of product, start and, systematically start at the top and work your way to the bottom. And you're going to paint a thin layer of latex to cover the whole, and you have to work fast. You have to work fast. Okay, you're going to paint a thin layer of latex over the entire mold. Make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. You should not have pools of latex. You should not have puddles. It should just be like you're painting over the top. You can paint over the eye if you want. And as you're painting, the reason why we're doing a thin layer first is so that we make sure that we get our brush into the nooks and crannies, into all those little deep holes that we made, the impressions that we made, so that we don't have any gaps when we peel our latex off. Okay? No gaps. Remember, rotate your foil, rotate your mold, so that you can see all of the nooks, crannies, and crevices that you had created yesterday. You should not have pools of latex. It should not be like a chunk of latex or gob of latex. It should just be painted thinly. You should still be able to see the clay because it's a thin application. Now, latex, because you're using a brush, just like paint, will splatter as you're brushing over a certain surface, like a textured surface. So don't splatter on your neighbor's clothing. Don't splatter on you in your clothing. So you do have to be gentle. Now the reason why I like to use a brush and rotate your foil as needed, and the reason why I like to use the brush is that the bristles are thin and it allows me to get and push into all those nooks and crannies. The thing I don't like about using a brush, unfortunately, is that I move the latex around a lot using a brush, which inevitably creates bubbles. So if you see any bubbles, try your bestest and hardest to pop as many bubbles as you can as you go. If a bubble is created in the latex, and if the bubble does not pop and it stays and it gets encapsulated in there, what happens is that you are going to have a pocket of air in your latex as it dries. So when you pull the latex off, you're going to see the hole where the bubble was. 2, your latex appliance is weakened because it has holes in it. Okay, so if you need a good application, a good prosthetic, you need to make sure that there's the least amount of bubbles possible. Now, could you use a sponge? Yes, absolutely. You can definitely use a sponge, and many people do, because brushes are more expensive and brushes get ruined. After using this brush, you're going to throw it away. There's no possible way to get that latex off of it properly and all the way and to restore your brush. So we use cheap brushes, okay? So it's very important to know when to use a brush and when to use a sponge. Now, if you want to go over the eye, you can, so you can connect your latex. The eye is not really that important. Remember that the eye, we created it just to kind of measure and kind of size out where the prosthetic is going to be placed on the human, on the client, on your model, or on your actor, actress, or yourself, right? Okay. Rotate your foil so that way you can see all the angles, nooks, and crannies. By the time you have finished doing your one thin painted application of latex over the top of your mold, where you first started should already be dry because it's super thin. So if you take your finger and you tap over the first part you started, the latex shouldn't come up off your finger. When you tap it and it comes off on your finger and your finger is white from the latex, then that means it's not dry yet. Okay? So from here, you're going to continue to start at back where you started, and you're going to continue to add a little bit. Now the second time, you're going to add a little bit more latex to your sections. So take a good gob of latex with your brush, transfer it over to your mold, and push the latex into all of the nooks and crannies that you had created. Turn your mold around so that you can see all the different angles, and make sure you fill in all of the holes. And again, try your hardest to avoid bubbles. So you can definitely brush the latex. Once you apply the latex and it begins to dry, sometimes if you come back and go over that same spot on the latex, what happens is if the latex had already started to dry, the latex will peel off, because you're dragging dried something over dried latex, and it'll just naturally begin to peel. So sometimes you have to wait for it to completely dry to have a smoother surface so you can go over it. Just kind of depends on your angle, the tool you're using, the amount of pressure you're pushing down over the latex. Okay. Rotate your foil, rotate your mold. Make sure that you're pushing the latex into the nooks and crannies. If you do not push the latex into the nook and the cranny, or all the way down into your indentation that you created, what happens is when your latex dries, when you peel it off tomorrow, you're going to have a big gap. Okay? And then the 3D effect, you're not going to have it anymore because there's a big old hole or big old gap. Now, once you've filled in a good amount and just kind of brush over, you should be able to let the latex will have just a quick second to kind of settle in and seep into the nooks and crannies. Okay? Any bubbles, kind of use the point of your brush to kind of pop those bubbles if possible, or brush over them to move the bubble to the side. And then give it a quick second to let it kind of settle in. Take some latex and go on the outskirts of your impression, and then add latex. That way, when you peel this latex off of your mold, what's going to happen is that you're going to have the ability to have something to hold on to, something to glue onto the skin, okay? Something to cut and kind of place over the skin, and have some working space. You don't want to take it all the way to the foil, so just try to stay away from the foil, but you do want to make an edge. Now, when you are using the brush, you'll notice that you're going to get brush strokes. And that's naturally happening because you have bristles, right, that you're using. So if you put your brush down and you use your finger you'll notice that when you use your finger, it's definitely going to allow you to get a smoother application and you have less brush strokes. So your texture is going to be smoother on the edges, which is what you want because you want it to blend into the skin. And then unless you're going to add texture to the design, or unless that's like what it's supposed to look like, right? You want that to be as smooth as possible, because if not, when it dries, the latex will dry with texture. So let's talk about our latex on our finger. So once you have the latex and you smoothed out the sides with your finger, okay, you made it as thin as possible on the edges, take your finger, and just like when you have a wet booger, you're going to do the roly-poly with your finger like so. As the air continues to hit the latex, it's going to come off of your fingers. Okay? Your finger will stay moist for a little bit, and then you're going to be able to, you don't have any more latex on your finger. If you don't go over the edges with your finger, believe me, you'll have texture. So when you peel this latex piece off, you'll have some texture on it, and when you apply it to the skin, it's gonna be a rough application. Okay. Once you're done blending the outer edges, then I'm going to show you the pouring technique. So you're going to take your cup and you're going to take your brush, and let's pour a little bit of latex at a time over your mold, and then you're going to take it, and as if you're decorating a cake, you're going to fully cover your mold. You should not be able to see. Now don't get carried away, because the thicker amount of latex that you apply, the more time that the latex needs to dry. So we need a thin enough layer or coat fully covering our mold, so that we only need it to dry 24 hours because we need it ready for tomorrow. If we have a super crazy thick layer of latex, then it needs 48 hours to dry. Okay? It will need 48 hours to dry. Once I pour and I apply, and I don't have like holes or divots or anything, I'm going to take my brush and go all the way swiping. Then I'm going to take my finger, dip it into my latex so my finger has some liquid on there. And then I'm just going to smooth it out with my finger. I should not see my mold popping through my latex. And then on my edges, I just want to smooth out my edges so I don't have a step. I want a ramp. So I have a smooth application on the body when I apply this to the body. Okay? At one point, the latex will begin to dry, and if you continue to manipulate the latex, you're going to have roly-polies instead of a smooth application. So once you've fully covered it, take your finger, do your roly-poly until all the latex comes off. Keep the roly-polies on top of the yellow paper, not on the floor. And then you are done. You can take the outer edges of your foil and you can kind of give them a little wall, and it'll hold your stuff in place. And there you have it. That is how you do your latex application. Okay. This is going to dry for 24 hours. Tomorrow morning, you're going to put powder over the top of it. If you do not put powder, it sticks to itself. And when you peel it off, you ruin your latex appliance. So you're going to put powder over it tomorrow, both sides. And then you're going to crack the outer edges of the clay, and you're going to peel the latex appliance off. Okay. And then there you have it. Then you'll have your skin. So when you're done with this, put it to the side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to play with the latex a little bit. So what I want you to do is I want you just to take your back of your hand. Okay. Well, let me come around and check yours first to make sure we're good. And then we'll do that. Work with the latex. Put your hand on the tabletop. You're going to take your latex. If your brush is kind of like, that's it, which is done, go ahead and take the new brush and work with the new brush. Pick up some latex. Squeeze your hand closed, make a fist, and really pull on the skin. So make a fist and go downward. Fist and down to stretch the skin. Okay? And then you're going to apply a thin layer in a square of latex. Now again, pay attention as you are applying it with a brush. Do you see how you have a lot of brush strokes? Okay? If it's a thin, thin, thin layer, what happens is as soon as the air hits it, it begins to dry. And if you keep going over it over and over and over again, eventually when it's dry, you are going to have roly-polies of latex that peel off. So then you have a ruined application. Once you do a thin layer, put the brush down, wave it around a little bit. When you touch the surface, if your finger comes out dirty like so, the latex is not ready. Roll your fingers as if you have a wet booger that you're getting rid of off of your fingers. Okay? Now take a look and then just kind of give it another little wave until it fully dries. There should be a thin, thin, thin layer, so this is going to dry super fast. When you come over and touch the surface, and if no white comes off, like so, then you know your latex is dry. On some of the thicker pieces, your finger will come out white, meaning that those sections are not dry. When you have a thin layer of latex, take your finger in the middle and do a circle. You're going to notice that as if you fell and scraped yourself, you have a little bit of the latex peeling off as if your surface skin has come off. Okay? Now, take your finger, okay? Dip your finger into your latex and smooth a new layer of latex over the top of the square, now using your finger. Do you see how more smoothly the application goes on? Now, underneath this, you have texture. So, inevitably, you're going to have a textured surface that you're applying latex on, so you're going to have texture. Those dried roly-polies from the bottom are going to pop through, and now you're going to have the roly-polies on the top surface of your new layer of latex. So this is to show you that when you're working with latex, and especially in thinner layers, it dries super fast. So you have to work super fast with the latex application. On the edges, if you notice the edges of your square, with these edges, if you have a big bulge or a bump or a thick layer of application, it doesn't blend with the skin. So take your finger and do like we did with the clay on the edges and smear the edges down. If it's already dried, you're going to see that line. And if it's too thin, then what happens is this. You start pulling the roly-polies. So then you have all this trash, which we call trash, because it's latex piece that you can't use. Take your finger and do the roly-poly like you're taking the booger off to get you a clean slate. Okay? Once the latex dries, there really is not a good way to blend your edges, because you get the roly-polies and then you get the line of demarcation. So you've got to work with the latex as you apply it. You have to do smooth, flat layers. Okay? And you do have to blend in. Ladies in the back, do we have questions? Okay, you do have to make sure that you're blending your edges as you go along. Okay? Alright, so as you're waving your hand over, typically you have a fan or a handheld fan of some sort. You definitely don't blow over the top of your client, or yourself is fine, but not your client. Okay? No one wants the tuna breath. Okay, so then you come and you wave and wave and wave. Before it's dry even, or once it's a little dry, you can go ahead and take your finger and you're going to, in the middle, do a circular rotation. And you're creating an entry wound or an exit wound. You're creating a hole. Okay? It can be slightly wet, can be slightly dry, but you're going to notice that on the dry spots, the latex will stick to itself. So when we peel, we've got to put powder over the top, okay, so that way it doesn't stick. So if you take your finger and do circular rotations on the edges, you're going to notice that the latex creates a circle. So everybody should have this circle on their hand right now. Okay? You can take your finger and go underneath the latex to peel some of that off as if it's your skin. And if you had like a brush or a tool, a weapon or something of some sort, and you're creating that effect of a stab, you can put that tool underneath and it looks like it's coming out from the surface. Okay? Obviously you would put the makeup over the top, blood and guts and all that good stuff to make it look more realistic. From here, what I need you to do is go ahead and carefully, if it's still wet and it flicks off to yourself or your client, okay, it'll get on your clothes, but go ahead and peel and roly-poly off of the whole surface of the latex. If you have hair, it will rip your hair, it will pull, it will tug. So the hairier you are, the more it will hurt. Latex should not ever go over the top of hair because latex pulls the hair. Okay, if it's short hair like arm hair or hand hair, it's okay, no big deal. Okay? I forgot to show you the wrinkle effect. When you let go of your hand, it shows like a wrinkled age effect when you stretched it to when you let it go. So I forgot to show you that. Okay, so make sure you have all the roly-polies on top of your yellow paper. If you have hair and there's latex stuck, you just kind of have to pick it off from the little hairs. Okay? You need to take the latex and you need to throw it in the trash can first without spilling it. Then you're going to take your yellow paper, you're going to roll everything inside the yellow paper without spilling the roly-polies on the floor. And then you're going to throw your paper in the trash. You're going to wash your hands with hot water and soap.